Howdy folks, hope you're all having a good one, and welcome back to World of Warships with Rear Admiral Jingles, where today K9 Transfer 1 here is going to be enjoying, when I use the word enjoying in the broadest possible sense of the word, a bit of an uphill struggle against, well, you'll see. K9 is in a Tier 6 domination battle, and he is in the German Tier 5 light cruiser Koenigsberg. I actually think the Koenigsberg's a pretty good ship. I think most of the Tier 5 light cruisers are pretty good ships, but they all share one very common problem. They're Tier 5 light cruisers, and regular viewers of this channel will be aware that Tier 5 light cruisers, and it's largely true of the Tier 6 light cruisers as well, but specifically the Tier 5 light cruisers are all made out of citadels, ammunition and fuel, and they're armoured with tissue paper. And the reason why this is such a particular problem for Tier 5 cruisers, more than Tier 6 cruisers, is because prior to Tier 5 you enjoy protected matchmaking. Tier 4 ships and below will only ever see ships that are at most one tier above them. That all goes away at Tier 5. Now it's not such a problem in this battle because it's Tier 6 maximum, but there are suddenly a lot more ships with guns of sufficiently large caliber to ignore your armour as if it wasn't even there. Now, it's not as if this wasn't a problem at Tier 4 and below in ships like, for example, the USS Phoenix, because there are still battleships at Tier 4, and Tier 4 light cruisers can fight Tier 5s, and there are battleships around at Tier 5 as well. But it's definitely a much, much bigger problem for Tier 5 light cruisers who can suddenly find themselves facing not just Tier 6, but also Tier 7 battleships with some seriously large guns. And if you haven't already learnt the lesson at Tier 4, that it's not a good idea to be getting shot at by battleships in one of these things, and it's absolutely suicidal to be exposing broadside, not just to battleships, but to other cruisers, you're going to have a very short career as a Tier 5 light cruiser captain. Having said that, though, the Koenigsberg is possibly best equipped of all of the Tier 5 light cruisers to deal with this new meta, because most of its guns are in the back. The ship is armed with 9 150mm guns, and they are pretty good guns. But they're arranged in 3 turrets, and only one of them's at the front. You can quite clearly see that 2 of those 3 turrets are at the back. Now, one of those turrets is capable of rotating a full 360 degrees, which does help with targets to the front, and the guns do have pretty good firing arcs. But the fact that 2/3 of your firepower is in the back of the ship should, if you're capable of taking a hint, have taught you that this ship is supposed to use all of that rearward-facing firepower in order to kite away from things that are shooting back at you, to keep them at arm's length, because that's something that Koenigsberg is very, very good at doing. The guns have decent range, and the ship is pretty fast. It's naturally designed to kite away from enemies while exposing them to the majority of your firepower and dodging any return fire, because your armour is not going to save you. Koenigsberg captains who fail to take that hint tend to have very short careers as Koenigsberg captains. Another good thing about this ship is because it is German, it enjoys what is known as the quarter caliber high explosive penetration rule. Most, but not all, ships calculate their high explosive penetration by dividing the caliber of the gun by 6. Which means that anybody else armed with these 150mm guns and firing high explosive shells would have 25mm of penetration, which is largely fine when it comes to firing high explosive at other cruisers, but can give you problems when it comes to the more heavily armoured battleships. Because the Koenigsberg is German, it gets the quarter caliber high explosive penetration rule, which means in order to find out how much armour its high explosive shells can deal with, you divide the caliber by 4 instead of 6, which gives the Koenigsberg's high explosive shells a 37mm penetration, which is far, far more useful when it comes to shooting at battleships. Like the New Mexico over there, hiding behind the island but detected and suffering the wrath of K9's 150mm guns and doing okay damage, because despite the advantage given by the German quarter caliber penetration rule with the high explosive shells, they're still not very good high explosive shells. The one saving grace here is because he's German and he doesn't have to use the IFHE skill in order to get that amount of penetration with his high explosive. He is actually capable of setting fires, but they also have a very low fire chance. Now, the armor-piercing shells are very, very good. They have excellent penetration, great shell velocity, but they are just 150mm in caliber. So against anything serious, you do have to be close. And you're in a light cruiser, and you really don't want to get close. Light cruisers like the enemy Omaha over there. By the way, I don't know if you've noticed, this team is down to 105 points. Because they've already suffered 4 casualties before they inflict their first casualty on the enemy team. Now, the Omaha, of course, is the poster boy of the Tier 5 light cruisers that like to explode as soon as you even look at them. Note that there is also a friendly Omaha who just passed out of view at the bottom of the screen there, on full health. Right now, not on full health for much longer, because he's not doing anything quite as stupid as the enemy Omaha over there, who was about to get into cover, where nobody would be able to shoot at him, and then suddenly decided, but if I keep moving, nobody will be able to shoot at me. So he starts reversing out, broadside on in front of, well, lots of things that he shouldn't, like the friendly Omaha is doing, and just lost half of his health. Reversing out in front of lots of things that he shouldn't be reversing out, broadside on in front of. Observe K9, also in a Tier 5 light cruiser, but on full health. Unlike the 2 Omahas. Seriously, Tier 5 light cruiser captains, take the hint. And Tier 6 light cruiser captains, you're not invulnerable either. Like the La Galissoniere over there, who is charging what appears to be a New Mexico and an Almirante Cochrane. Or perhaps he's just feeling sorry for K9's team. And he thought he'd give them a fighting chance by sacrificing himself and getting them back up to nearly 100 points. Because at the point where the La Galissoniere suicided, K9's team were down to 55 points. They've been at less than 200 points for the majority of this game. In fact, the only reason they were ever above 200 points is because the game gives both teams 300 points at the start. Oh, and he's under air attack. Let's see how effective his AA guns are. Now, he already has 1 air kill from earlier. He picked off a survivor that flew over the Omaha and the New York. He just shot down another one, but again, that was a low-health survivor of overflying other friendly ships, and now here comes the flight of aircraft that are actually attacking him, and he shoots down none of them. He gets his patrol fighters away, and the patrol fighters do claim another kill or 2, but at no point did he actually do any damage to or shoot down anything that mattered. He picked off a couple of low health survivors of squadrons that had flown over and got shot at, but not shot down by other friendly ships, and then the 2 flight or 2 aircraft element that actually conducted the attack suffered no damage whatsoever while his AA guns were shooting down other shit that didn't matter. So the actual number of air kills displayed in the ribbons there, and the amount of damage done to aircraft displayed separately from your actual damage done. I mean, none of this used to be in the game. Certainly not the damage done to aircraft, but people were blazing away at aircraft coming in, and the aircraft were still getting the strikes off, and people were saying, are my AA guns actually doing anything? So Wargaming put that number there to show how much damage you were doing to aircraft. They didn't buff your damage to aircraft. They didn't suddenly start making your guns target the aircraft that actually mattered, but that's there so you can think, I'm helping. It's there to make you feel good about all of the damage that you're not doing to anything that actually matters. Of course, damage to aircraft used to matter. Aircraft shot down always mattered, even if they weren't the aircraft that were directly attacking you. Oh, hang on. That's going to be a torpedo hit. Yes, indeed it is, and the flood. Because aircraft carriers never used to have unicorns working below the decks in magical pixie factories building fresh aircraft. The aircraft that you had at the start of the battle were all the aircraft you were ever going to have, so anything that got shot down, even if it wasn't directly taking part in an attack, hurt an aircraft carrier. But of course, you know, those days are long gone. Oh, hello, his secondaries just opened up on that submarine, which notified him to the fact that it was on the surface and he can actually do some damage to it. And he did some damage to it. And of course, submarines don't have a huge amount of health to begin with, so any damage to a submarine is important. Now, K9 has done pretty well thus far to avoid actually taking any damage. However, that could have been a lot worse. The time has now arrived where looking after that precious health bar has become counterproductive because he only has 4 surviving teammates. They're still below 200 points. They only have 1 cap circle thanks to the Almirante Cochrane and the New Mexico over at Cap Circle Charlie, but the enemy team have 1, they're about to take another, and they have a nearly 400 point lead. So he has little choice other than to take on something that is easily capable of killing him. He's, bless him, 150mm AP is never going to knock out New Mexico's turrets, but at the same time he did angle so that any shots that hit his armor belt would probably ricochet and also provide a much more narrow target profile to give him some kind of defense from the notoriously inaccurate guns on the New Mexico. He's got the island in the way now, which is the best possible defense, but the enemy team have just claimed another kill, took out the Almirante Cochrane over there, knocking the team down well back below 200 points, with the enemy team on 657. Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. The New Mexico has now been joined by an enemy submarine. If you look at the map, there's a Marblehead sneaking around the island to the south, basically following him around there. What to do, what to do. He can hope that the New Mexico is dumb enough to give him a torpedo shot, but you can't rely on that. And as the New Mexico chases him very slowly around this island, there go the submarine's torpedoes. Those are no problem. He's now able to slip into this cap circle. And while he isn't going to cap it, he's at least contesting it, so the enemy team are no longer getting any points from it. Meanwhile, the Marblehead down to the south is about to round the island and will be able to shoot at him, but he's been very cleverly using this island in order to only have to fight 1 enemy ship at a time. And there's the enemy submarine. He has been sonar pinged. There goes the damage control. Perfect timing. Dodges the torpedoes. The submarine is in some real pretty shit now. And of course, because he's a light cruiser, he also has depth charges. Depth charges away. Come on, you beauty. Get him. Got him. Right. Marblehead, New Mexico. Marblehead's easier to kill. Not if it angles like that. Of course, if it turns to give broadside. And the New Mexico was trying to chase him around the island and has now realised the errors of its ways and is trying to swing around and get the guns pointing back this way. But these 150mm guns at this kind of range, easily capable of doing fairly significant amounts of damage to a battleship at close range. Fortunately, the torpedoes finished the job. 3 kills. The team are back above 300 points for the first time in this battle. Well, they're not back above 300 points. They have never been above 300 points. This battle is nearly 3/4 done, and this is the first time the team have been above 300 points. Oh, here comes the enemy carrier. Oh, this is bad news. There go the patrol fighters. I mean, you know, fat lot of good they're going to do. They've caught him at a bad time, actually. He's slow. He has to throttle back on the engines in order to not run aground and be a sitting duck for these torpedoes. Oh, this might hurt. I mean, they've been dropped from ahead, so that doesn't hurt his chances, but his best chance, yep, there it is. He throttled up to full speed and was just able to meet those torpedoes before they armed. A certain amount of sympathy, I think, here for the enemy carrier player, because if he launched those torpedoes from the side with K9 pinned up against the island there at low speed, it would have made more sense if not for the fact that the Marblehead was busy sinking and would probably have blocked a lot of those torpedoes, so he didn't have a huge amount of choice. So he did kind of have to drop those torpedoes from ahead, but he still dropped them way too late and gave K9 the chance to actually charge into them and catch them before they had the chance to arm. The carrier's coming back to finish the job. This is going to be a problem, obviously, for K9, because he wants to finish capping to give the team a cap advantage. And they do actually, while they still have nowhere near a points advantage, the enemy team is still 300 points ahead. But they do actually have a numbers advantage for the first time in this game as well, with the enemy team only having 3 ships left alive. I mean, it's not much of a numbers advantage. They've got 4 ships to the enemy's 3, but the carrier's doing his level best to try to reset this cap, And again, it's not an ideal circumstance for K9 because he had to slow down in order to not run out of the cap circle. And the carrier does get one torpedo hit because he had to slow down and turn to avoid running out of the cap circle. But it was too little and too late. He has managed to take this cap, and the enemy team are now only 200 points ahead. And they only have 2 surviving ships. The thing about airdrop torpedoes, they don't do as much damage as ship-launched torpedoes because they have to be smaller and lighter in order to be able to be carried by aircraft. So they don't pack as much explosive power as a ship-launched torpedo. So taking one airdrop torpedo isn't necessarily going to be catastrophic. So the good news, the enemy team only have 2 surviving ships. The bad news, they're both carriers. A Seraph and a Ranger. So that air attack missed. Although I'm sure there's plenty more where that one came from. Ideally, the team are going to want to flip that central cap at Bravo, just as an insurance policy in case, you know, the carriers kill them all. And the New Mexico is doing exactly that. Now, this is good because it's going to force the carriers to choose between defending themselves or preventing that cap. And fingers crossed for the New Mexico. Not necessarily great news for K9 here. But fingers crossed that's what they're going to choose. Both of them are now spotted. More skip bombs coming from the Serov. Ooh, citadels on the Ranger. Armor piercing. The armor piercing on the Koenigsberg is pretty good. More citadels, and of course the armor on the Ranger is pretty bad. The Ranger, of course, isn't the one attacking him. The Ranger is trying to reset the cap. So he needs to die. I mean, they both need to die because they're carriers and they don't deserve to live. But also for, you know, tactical reasons. The New Mexico, they can't afford to lose him. Not with the enemy team still ahead on points and only 3 minutes of this battle remaining. There goes. Oh, no, he didn't quite kill him, but there's the high caliber award. 130,000 damage done. This salvo is surely going to sink him. Yes, he's got him. Now he's switching fire to the Serov. Under normal circumstances, under these conditions, at this point in the battle, when there's only one enemy ship left, you are finally ahead on points. The enemy team have no cap circles, and the enemy ship that's left is easily capable of killing you. You'd want to turn around and run away. But you can't run away from an aircraft carrier. It's just one of the many advantages that they enjoy. Plus, you know, armoured decks like that, where armour-piercing shells are doing exactly nothing. Might be a good idea to switch to high explosive here. Unless he turns around and gives you broadside to shoot at, but you can't count on that happening. And again, to be fair to both of the aircraft carrier players in this battle, if I haven't mentioned it already, the Koenigsberg AA is notoriously crap. Even by the notoriously crap standard that exists for everybody else in World of Warships. Yet, high explosive is the only thing that's going to do the job here. I mean, again, to be fair, K9 is switching to the carrier superstructure, which is, again, another advantage because it's tiny and next to impossible to hit. But thanks to that quarter caliber penetration rule with German 150mm high explosives, he is actually able to do damage with the high explosive shells on a target that couldn't be damaged by the fucking armor piercing shells. Because that makes sense, doesn't it? Oh, takes another torpedo. The Seraph, however, has run out of places to hide. There's the armor piercing. He's finally got that broadside to shoot at. He is now, of course, in range of the Seraph's secondaries, but it's too little too late. The armor piercing does the job. But of course, just because a carrier's dead and you've won doesn't mean it can't still ruin your day. Here come the rocket attack planes. No, just a day late and $1 short. Because with the amount of health that K9 had, they would have probably still succeeded in utterly ruining his day. K9 Transfer 1 on the North American server. I think we can probably all agree that that was a textbook example of how to tier 5 light cruiser. He looked after his health when he needed to, and then when he needed to trade that health for kills and damage and capture points, he did exactly that. That is pretty much how you light cruiser, and if not for him, I think we can also probably agree that his team would have suffered a rather humiliating defeat. So, extremely well done to K9 Transfer 1 in the German Tier 5 light cruiser. A rather good ship, I do have to say, despite its obvious limitations, the Koenigsberg. Hope you all enjoyed it, and as always, take care, and I'll catch you next time.